Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody, and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We continue with our Modern World History series by looking at challenges for African nations. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. Feel free to use it. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. Okay, let's go. A close look at South Africa reveals the problems that many African countries have faced with building national unity. After South Africa achieved self-rule in 1910, the white minority controlled the government and the economy. During the period of apartheid, the white minority government passed laws that severely restricted the black majority. The African National Congress, ANC, with Nelson Mandela as one of its leaders, opposed apartheid and led the struggle for majority rule. A massacre by government troops at Sharpeville in 1960 and again in 1976 in the township of Soweto brought world condemnation. The nonviolent work of Anglican Bishop Desmond Tutu helped rally opposition. After sanctions by many world countries and massive protests in South Africa, President F.W. de Klerk ended apartheid in 1990 and released Nelson Mandela from prison. Mandela was elected president in 1994 in the country's first free and open election. As president, Mandela welcomed old opponents into his government as a way to heal the country's wounds. After World War II, African nations had little capital to invest, so they had to make difficult economic choices. Some nations chose socialism, a system in which the government controls parts of the economy. The leaders of these governments hoped to end foreign influence in their countries and to close the gap between the rich and the poor. However, socialism sometimes led to large, inefficient bureaucracies. Other nations relied on capitalism or market economies. These economies were often more efficient, but foreign owners of businesses took profits out of the country. Some governments tried to fund development by growing crops for export rather than food crops. However, this forced them to import food to replace the food crops. Governments then had to subsidize part of the cost of importing food from overseas. African nations faced many obstacles to development. Droughts led to famine in parts of Africa. This was especially true in the Sahel, where overgrazing and farming led to desertification. People in African nations also faced the devastating disease AIDS. Since the 1980s, millions of children in Africa have been orphaned by AIDS. Urbanization has also created problems in Africa. This shift from rural areas to cities has meant hardship for many and has weakened traditional values. However, in West Africa, the growth of urban markets has increased opportunities for women. Another concern in Africa is environmental threats. Many of Africa's animal habitats have been destroyed, causing many animals to become endangered species. One environmental activist, Wangari Maathai, has fought back by starting the Green Belt movement. An aim of this organization is to restore forest land. It also helps local women with projects of sustainable development that aim to provide lasting benefits for future generations. HIV/AIDS, or acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and other diseases such as malaria are a major health threat. Efforts to combat malaria, such as providing mosquito netting, have slowed the death rates. However, many children especially die from malaria every day. Since the 1990s, African countries have worked to educate people and to control the spread of AIDS. Another concern is conflict and terrorism, which exists between warlords or local strongmen and governments. African nations, along with the UN, have worked to develop counterterrorism strategies to deal with terrorist groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda, mostly in the Sahel region. Boko Haram in Nigeria and nearby countries began by opposing non-Islamic education, but then turned to terrorism. Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab in Kenya want to establish a fundamentalist state based on Islamic law. Alright, here is the recap. South Africa's journey is like a soap opera of struggle, resilience, and the occasional plot twist. After achieving self-rule in 1910, the white minority ran the show, enforcing apartheid laws that treated the black majority like extras in their own movie. Enter the African National Congress, ANC, with Nelson Mandela as a lead role, fighting for justice despite brutal massacres like Sharpeville and Soweto. Desmond Tutu brought a mix of activism and nonviolence to the mix, and with international sanctions and protests mounting, President F.W. de Klerk finally ended apartheid in 1990, releasing Mandela, who went from prison to presidency in 1994. Meanwhile, across Africa, nations juggled socialism, capitalism, environmental challenges, and health crises like AIDS, often making tough economic choices that sometimes felt like trading one headache for another. Throw in a dose of urbanization, environmental activism from Wangari Maathai, and conflicts with groups like Boko Haram, and you've got a continent working tirelessly to rewrite its narrative with courage, hope, and a lot of grit. There you have it, folks. That is challenges for African nations nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. Don't forget that the algorithm is challenging, and you can help me conquer it by going nuts on those like and subscribe buttons for me. Say hi in the comments too. See y'all next time on Nutshelled History.